spring of 2011, a vicious wildfire ripped through a remote region in far west Texas called the Big Bend. When it was all over, the fire had burned up over 350,000 acres of prime ranch land in this area, and it went down in the record books as the third largest wildfire in Texas history. I was actually born just a couple of miles from those photographs of the fire there. I've been living in Austin, Texas for 30 years, which is right in the center of the state of Texas. But I'm from this region, which is called the Big Bend because the Rio Grande River, which goes from El Paso in the far west all the way down to the south to Brownsville, takes a big turn right there. And so that's why it's called the Big Bend. It's a very sort of desolate, big sky country. The fire out in the Big Bend in 2011 was called the Rock House Fire because it started in an old abandoned ranch house from electrical fire. There were 70-mile-per-hour winds, and there had been an unusually wet season the year before, and so there was a lot of fuel. And it caused untold damage to a lot of historical ranches in this area that had, a lot of them were financially crippled and had to go bankrupt. Herds of cattle were killed. It burned down fencing, and it killed hundreds of horses. And this is definitely a ranching area. Cowboys live out in this area, and they depend on the land for their livelihood. They depend on one another, their fellow cowhands, but they also really depend on their horses, and they love their horses. So this was very devastating to this area. But as they always say in Texas, is when a cowboy falls off a horse, he likes to get right back on. These are not cowboys. These are my 19 pentagram partners. And it was a recent meeting that we had in New York City. I have been a partner for 14 years, and I'm the only partner now in Austin, Texas. And my partners think that I actually ride a horse to work every day. And I do everything I can to try to make that myth even stronger. But one of the things that I love about being a part of a group like Pentagram is it's very, very global. We have offices in London, Berlin, San Francisco, New York, Austin. But all my partners are influenced by the place where they're from. One of the newest partners, Natasha Jen, who's wearing the animal print, she's originally from Taiwan, and I can't put my finger on it, but whenever I see her work, I can see the influence of the place where she's from in her work. And even Michael Beirut, I think, is influenced from the exotic place where he's from, which is Ohio. Pentagram is over 40 years old now, and we've been doing these little pentagram papers for 40 years. They always have a little distinctive black cover with a little Scotch rule, and usually they're about very visual subject matter, cigar wrappers, collections of kimonos, those kind of things. They're very, very, very visual. But I saw some photographs of these guys. Now, you know what these guys are. These are poets. These are actually cowboy poets. And I always thought it was very strange that there's such a thing as cowboy poetry. Because cowboys kind of go out of their way to talk very little. And the fact that they're actually writing poetry, I think, is sort of very interesting, actually. But these were photographs taken in Alpine, where I was born, by a young photographer named J.B. Sauceda in Austin. And I just loved him, so I sent him back out there again. And so I created a pentagram paper. And this was the cover of it, but my notion was usually we just send these little books out to our clients. This particular one went all over Europe, all over the UK, all over the country, all over the world. People loved it. But at the end when it first came out, I put together a fundraiser. I set up a big tent in my parking lot, and I invited the whole world to come, and we gave the book away. And we were able to raise around $5,000 that we actually gave back to the Fire Relief Fund back where I was born in the Big Bend. So we kind of were able to take this little book that we always do and turn it into something that helped the place where I'm from. Cowboy poetry here's some spreads from it. It's hokey, it's corny, it's kind of like what you think it is, but I really love it. And I think a lot of other people loved it because there's something about it that's very honest, down to earth, and it's about the things that cowboys love. They love the land, they love their fellow cowboys, they love their family, and they love horses.
I have run on middle fingernail through Eolithic morning. I have thundered down the coach road with the revolution's warning. I have carried countless errant knights who never found the grail. I have strained before the caissons. I have moved the nation's mail. I've made knights of lowly tribesmen and kings from ranks of peons. I have given pride and arrogance to riding men for eons. I have grazed among the lodges and the teepees and the yurts. I have felt the sting of driving whips, lashes, spurs, and quirts. I am roguish, I am flighty, I am inbred, I am lowly. I'm a nightmare, I am wild, I am the horse. I am gallant and exalted, I am stately, I am noble, I'm impressive, I am grand, I am the horse. I have suffered gross indignities from users and from winners, and I felt the hand of kindness from the losers and the sinners. I have given for the cruel hand and given for the kind, heaved a sigh at Appomattox when surrender had been signed. I can be as tough as hardened steel, as fragile as a flower. I know not my endurance, and I know not my own power. I have died with heart exploded neath the cheering in the stands, calmly stood beneath the hanging noose of vigilante bands. I have traveled under conqueror and underneath the beaten, yet I've never chosen sides. I am the horse.
like Michael said, I'm a fifth-generation Texan, and I am the son of several cowboys. This is a photograph of my grandfather, who worked on ranches all over West Texas. His name was Pat, and he was actually named after a mule. So I didn't know that till after he had passed away. But his real name was Hervey, and my son is actually named after my grandfather, so he's indirectly named after a mule as well. My grandpa was a Texas storyteller, and so I would sit on his lap, and he would tell me Texas tall tales, and actually some of them were actually true. And he would read this book to me, and I still have this book, the Book of Cowboys, and this book has inspired me throughout my career. I've designed over 100 books, and this book has inspired me in a lot of ways. It had these big, beautiful, full-color illustrations that I would look at for hours, and it also had these wonderful little drawings in the margins. I've actually tried to imitate this book design over the years. I think we would call, this particular one's all about saddles. I think we would call those infographics today. So then, like I said, I've designed hundreds of books, but I'd never written a book until this book. And this book is also called Cowboys, except for this is about a legendary semi-pro baseball team called the Alpine Cowboys. The Alpine Cowboys were owned by a bigger-than-life Texas legend. He was a rancher that owned one of the largest ranches in the world at the time. It was the second largest ranch to the King Ranch. It was over 350,000 acres. His name was Mr. Coconut. His name was Herbert Coconut Jr. And when my brothers and I, when we were growing up, we used to hear about him all the time. We thought his name was Mr. Coconuts. You can see there in that picture how much he loves baseball. So he went on a quest to build the most beautiful baseball stadium that he could in 1945. He traveled all over the United States. He looked at all the very best baseball parks, and he spared no expense. And he built this beautiful, beautiful baseball field, which is still there in the middle of nowhere on his land in Alpine. It's truly the field of dreams. His ranch was called the 06 Ranch. And the other thing that Mr. Herbert is what they called him, because Mr. Coconut's kind of a difficult name. One of the things that he would do was he would employ all his players at the ranch. So they were actually working as real cowboys, working on the off season. But the other thing he did was he would pay their way through school. And so a lot of these players didn't have the means to go to college. There's a little university there in Alpine called Sul Ross. And so this is my father, Doyle Stout, who benefited from this kindness. My dad grew up in Dallas. He was a left-handed pitcher, and he had the opportunity to go to the Texas State Championship game in Austin, where his team was kind of a Cinderella story, won the state championship. And during the last game, my dad broke the Texas high school strikeout record, which was 21 strikeouts in a single game. Mr. Coconut came down on the field right after the game. My dad was all excited, and he offered my dad a chance to go to Alpine, and he paid his way all through school. My dad ended up getting his master's degree. So it was a great opportunity for him. That story and the entire history of the Alpine Cowboys, if you ever want to read it, is in this book that I designed with my dad. My dad is still working. He hasn't retired yet. He lives over in Asia. And so up until we did this book, he had no idea what a graphic designer does. He used to always ask me, don't we have computers that do that stuff? And so doing this book together really brought us together and gave him more of an understanding about what book designers actually do. So it was really great for the book launch event. We had it in Alpine. The mayor of Alpine, who is also a cowboy poet, came and welcomed everyone to this fantastic book launch party we had. There was probably like 500 people there. I wore Mr. Coconut's hat and tie when I greeted everyone. And what's wonderful about this was it brought me full circle back to where I'm from, back to a place. And the sense of place, being from somewhere, I think is so important to us as graphic designers and what we do. Is like, I think that if you don't pay attention to where you're from, then you kind of get lost in trying to be global or something. And I think it's really important to understand who you are and where you're from. This is my mom and dad on their very first date in the Big Bend National Park. So this whole project brought me back full circle. Later on, my father, after his baseball career, he became a career Marine. He was in the Marine Corps. We traveled all over the country. We moved every single year. This is a picture of me and my brother at my grandparents' house. And of course, I never lost my Texas roots. So my partners think that I still dress like this when I go to work every day. And so eventually I made my way to Austin, where I became the art director of Texas Monthly magazine for 13 years. This is one of the most iconic covers I did when I was at Texas Monthly. This is our much beloved governor, Ann Richards. At the time, there was talk that she could be the very first woman president. So I had this idea of white hot mama, a motorcycle riding high. And the way this idea came about was I was in an editorial meeting, and I had actually seen a picture in the newspaper of Ann Richards posing kind of on the side of a Harley Davidson. And what had happened was she had been quoted in the paper saying that she wanted to learn how to ride a Harley for her 60th birthday. And so Harley Davidson sent her a Harley. So there's just something great about how she captures the Texas character, a kind of foul-mouthed, feisty grandma riding a Harley. And this is actually, this is back during my John Bon Jovi days, like during the photo shoot. And this is another kind of iconic cover I did. Also, that a very sort of iconic cowboy image. This is Joaquin Jackson, who's a very famous Texas Ranger from Alpine. And this photograph taken by Dan Winters, who's an amazing editorial photographer, was so powerful that it actually overshadowed what the story was about. The story was negative about the Texas Rangers because Joaquin and a bunch of other Texas Rangers had quit the force because Ann Richards was forcing women into the Texas Rangers ranks. And so then eventually, my reputation as a magazine designer led to this wonderful opportunity I had I was asked to join Pentagram as a partner, and the best part of it was I could be part of an international design firm with partners all over the world, but I could stay in my much beloved Austin, Texas.
Feel like you do in the winter or them long hot summer days when your feelings and the weather seem to sort of go together and you're quiet in those dreamy autumn days. When that last big steer is goaded down the chute and fully loaded, and the summer crew has ceased to hit the ball, when a feller gets to dragging to that home ranch with a wagon, when we finish shipping cattle in the fall. There's only 2 men left to stand and to do that job of winter branding. And your partner, he's eloping by your side with a brand new saddle squeaking, and neither one of you are speaking, and you're pretty sure it's going to be a quiet ride. Well, you savvy one another. You know him like a brother. He's friendly, he's quiet, that's all. And he's thinking as he's dragging to that home ranch with a wagon when we finish shipping cattle in the fall. And the saddle horse is stringing at an easy walk to swinging behind the old chuck wagon moving slow. They're weary, gaunt, and jaded. For all the mud and brush they waded, you know, they got down to business long ago. Well, they ain't a horse of acting sporty, not a horse of being snorty, but in the spring they were full of buck and ball. Now they're gentle as a dragon to that home ranch with a wagon when we finish shipping cattle in the fall.
So this is a picture of J. Frank Dobie, who was a famous Texas author and folklorist. And he wrote a lot about the mythology of Texas, and he did a lot to promote the myth. He's kind of a hero of mine. He also believed in the power of regionalism, of being from somewhere. And I always loved this quote about that very thing. One of the things that J. Frank Dobie didn't like, though, he didn't like the perception by the rest of the world that Texans like to brag a lot. But I actually really like that idea. I think it's, as you can tell, I'm not worried about bragging about myself. But I also think that it's a shared sense of humor, this idea of there's all these things that Texans have that don't really take seriously. It's just kind of a shared sense of humor. One of them is this idea that we're kind of on the earth by ourselves. This was for a 20th anniversary issue, and when I was at Texas Monthly, and we called this Planet Texas. And so that theme of the Texas brag map, I've used that a lot. This was Sappy Paper was doing a paper promotion, and they split, in this paper promotion, they split the country up, the U.S. up into 6 parts. Then they asked a designer from each region to basically decorate that part of or design that part of the map. So of course they asked me to do the Southwest, which included Texas. And so they sent me kind of a skeleton outline, like a black and white outline of that region. And of course what I did was I made Texas about 3 times as big as it was supposed to be on the map. And then I took all the less interesting, insignificant states around it and just kind of crammed them in there. And then this is another idea like that. This was, I was asked to go do a lecture up in Vermont, so I just crammed all the states into the shape of Texas, mainly just to point out how small and insignificant Vermont looks when you put it in Texas. And then here's this idea that Texans also like, which is this idea that everything is bigger. This is actually kind of a campaign I did for Texas Monthly after I left Texas Monthly, where obviously the magazine is bigger than Texas. This is Big Tex. He's a character, kind of iconic figure. Then when you go to the State Fair of Texas, he greets you and he says howdy and all this kind of stuff. And he looks weird, but he's really big. And this gave us an idea. This actually is a project I did with Michael Beirut, where we were given the task to brand the city of Lexington, Kentucky. And it was on the occasion of the equestrian games coming to the United States for the first time, and it was going to be held in Lexington, Kentucky. Lexington that area is known as the Bluegrass region. They're known for that and for bourbon and for their racehorses. So instead of doing a logo, which is what I think they wanted us to do, we did this giant horse named Big Lex. And so then later on, I did this poster for the Texas Book Festival. This was during 2011, and I had the Rock House fire in my mind, so did this image. It was actually quite controversial for a book festival. This is a project I did with Mary Ellen Mark, one of the top photojournalists in the country from New York. I had seen some pictures she had done of the Indian circus, and I thought, well, what do we have in Texas that's like that? So I sent her to photograph the small town rodeo, the small Texas rodeo. It was the largest piece I ever did photographically in Texas Monthly. It was 14 pages. And she didn't really focus on the cowboys. She focused on the sort of the sideshow aspect of it. So I think it was a really important piece. I spent my entire yearly budget on this project, and so I had to spend the rest of the year trying to figure out how to do the magazine without a budget. There's a cover I did recently for a series of essays by Gail Collins, the New York Times writer. And so, easiest cover I ever did. I'm sure they called me because I'm like that designer in Texas. I found an old postcard of the Washington Monument and put a cowboy hat on there. And here's a whole thing I did about big hair. I'm from Texas, so I really like big hair. I like big hair, and I like lots of makeup and all that kind of stuff. So this actually, what's funny about this is not a model. This woman sent me a letter with a photograph of herself, and she said, "Dear Mr. Stout, I like to wear my hair in the shape of a cowboy hat. Will you put me on the cover of Texas Monthly?" And so I had to track her down. She'd been divorced 3 times by the final, But if you wear your hair like that, you get divorced a lot. Yeah. And so that you can see how these Texas themes kind of play out into my other work. And so this was a magazine, Loyola Marymount University. So big hair. Again, this is the animator for the Johnny Bravo TV show.
Sometimes folks from foreign states misunderstand our pride. I guess if you weren't raised here, it's hard to see our side. It's about independence. It's about honor. It's about the land. It's about making your own way in life and being your own man. Our forebears stood tall in Gonzales and answered when tyrants came with a shot from their little cannon, filled with horseshoes, nails, and chain. Morning fog broke over the Guadalupe, and the Mexicans demanded the gun. They got Sarah DeWitt's "Come and Take It" flag, waving proudly in the sun. And those men who died at the Alamo, outnumbered 20 to 1, they left a legacy for us to live up to. It's passed down from father to son. Was it legend and myth that traversed through that line in the Texas sand? Well, those legends and myths remind us that there comes a time when you take a stand. The settlers who came to Texas, they knew when they left their home they'd chosen a life of hardship, but they wanted a place of their own. Texas was heaven for men and dogs and hell on horses and women, it said. Now our women are independent and strong, and better horses haven't been bred. I can't tell you where we're headed. Things are changing way too fast. The young folks are becoming homogenized. They're losing touch with their heritage and past. You can only hope that there lies somewhere deep in their soul an ember still aglow that burst into flame when they hear God Bless Texas or Remember the Alamo. Oh, we might tell a windier few, and some folks would say that we brag, but you know, you can raise it anywhere on earth and they recognize our flag. So when they scorn or condescend, speak up, set them straight. Be proud that you're from Texas, the sovereign Lone Star State.
So, although I've been in Austin now for almost 30 years, I don't really do that much work in Austin or even in Texas. However, this is a project that I did for the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston that was the first ever history of Japanese photography. And I can't put my finger on it once again, but I do think that there are things about my Texas roots that have sort of affected almost all my work in some way. It's interesting to me that the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston has one of the largest collections of African art in the world. This is a book I did for that. And this was a poster a recent poster I did for an Austin entrepreneur who did this film about building a high school in Kenya. This was a redesign of the Times Education Supplement. One of my London partners, David Hillman, had originally done this design. The people in London that we did this for really loved this, how it turned out, and they kept saying that I had infused it somehow with a Texas sense of humor, whatever that means. And this is a recent project for the World Wildlife Fund, which is headquartered in Washington, D.C., where we had, instead of putting cute, cuddly animals on the cover, we kind of feature details of this happens to be a detail of ivory, and when you open it up, it gives you the conservation story. Somebody asked me, where did I get the idea for this idea of kind of like the covers that focus on fur and skin and whatnot, and I say, I think it's because of my Texas instinct to go hunt animals down and then make them into boots and saddles. And then this is a project I did for Darden Smith, who's a singer-songwriter, which kind of brought me, once again, back to the Big Bend. This album was called Marathon. This is the lyric book. And Marathon is actually a marathon away from Alpine. And then back to my home community, this was a project I did on homelessness for a pentagram paper that we called Signs. So we had photographs of homeless people, and we photographed the signs that the panhandlers hold. Once again, I did a fundraiser, and we raised about $8,000 for this local group. And it became a book that we were able to get 35 poems by Tom Waits to go with this book. And so this brings me to you probably wondering who this gentleman is right here, this mysterious gentleman playing the piano. This is Graham Reynolds. Graham is a good friend of mine and a fellow Austinite. And this is a picture of Graham when he was growing up in Connecticut. In Texas, we call that a damn Yankee. He was very influenced by punk rock music, a little bit different influence than me. But he's done a whole variety of ballets, music for ballets in Austin. This was a trash truck ballet that he did music for. He's done some really high-profile movies. This movie, Before Midnight, he did the score for, has been nominated for an Academy Award. And the reason I wanted Graham to come do this with me was he changes the perception, I think, of what people think Texans are like. I think I'm more like what people think Texans are like. But Graham has lived in Austin now for 20 years, and I can't thank him enough for coming and doing this with me. We really wanted to do something that was as big and brash as Texas. Thank you.